our family's journey. So this is David's story, our story, the impact on us as a family, sorry. And I'm going to take you through a bit of a timeline, starting from pre-diagnosis. David had his first seizure when he was 6 years old. We found him slumped in his bedroom. He was like a rag doll, rushed him off to A&E, and were consequently told, we think your child's had an epileptic seizure. We didn't have a clue what was going on. He had a number of tests. He was put on some medication for absent seizures, but 6 months later, wham, that major sudden onset of seizures every few hours that progressed over the coming weeks to more than hourly, 24/7, day and night. He was having 25, 30 seizures every 24 hours. We got him on some more medication. They changed his medication. He was in hospital for a week. But the seizures weren't relenting. And eventually, after some telemetry testing, where they fully confirmed that it was epilepsy, because the local hospitals weren't even sure that this was epilepsy because of the nocturnal seizures. Were they really seizures? Nobody was recognising the EEG pattern, what was going on here. But our paediatric neurologist put David on some steroids. It was the day before we were going on a fortnight's holiday, and we were sent home with a backpack. My parents will remember this, Dave. A backpack full of new medications, and we were told to go on holiday. David was he was seizing constantly at this time, but we were just told, just go, you need this time. Within that 2-week period, his seizures decreased exponentially, and by the time we came home, it was just that magic bullet for David. He was back to having a few seizures a day, and he was back to being more like David again in himself. About a year after that, because we still didn't know what the cause of his epilepsy was, he was taken in by Great Ormond Street for brain surgery workup, see if there was anything going on, whether he was a suitable candidate for brain surgery. But that was actually stopped about 2/3 of the way through, because his seizures were actually doing really well at that time. And that was a good thing, because it saved them a little bit of the money, because actually, as we know, ring chromosome 20 is not suitable for brain surgery. By chance, a while after that, our paediatrician on our regular visit just sort of looked at David and said, he's got a slightly small head, a bit sticky out ears, and we thought, not a little 7, 8-year-old little boy, doesn't look any different to any normal. She said, I'll run the chromosome test. Blood test, that won't hurt. She was as gobsmacked as we were. She had no idea what she was sending off for when it came back with the ring 20 diagnosis. It was pure chance. Nobody else had suspected it until that point. We were then very lucky that there was a trial for VNS going on a few months later, and David was randomised in that trial to be given a VNS implant, and that helped him, started to begin to help him along the way. Battery was changed about 5-6 years later. And his seizures were kind of doing okay in these primary school years. They were only a few a week, that kind of, but they started to increase as he got towards his early teens, and that's been a bit of a pattern. We tried ketogenic diet because of the increase in the seizures along this time. As I've got at the top of the picture, you'll see we're along this journey, we're also trying every single AED going, by the way. Every time we add one on, we take it off. Nothing's working. The first trial, the ketogenic diet, was stopped after 3 weeks because David just wasn't responding very well to it. He was actually getting a lot worse. He was pulled off. But we retried it again under the new modified Atkins version, and David, up until last Christmas, had been on ketogenic diet for 2.5 years. I must say, you were fantastic, David. I don't know how you did it. He was so compliant for a young teenage boy. Nobody said he would stick to it, but he did religiously. And it really helped him. It gave him some control back with the seizures, but it was the mood and alertness that really came through and really helped him out as a result of that diet. During that period, his battery had run out. The last VNS only lasted just over 3 years, and he's now got the new Aspire VNS, which you'll hear about a little bit later today, which has got the auto-stimulation feature. But last year, we saw the return of the nighttime seizures. We hadn't had it since right way back in the beginning when he was 7 years old. Last year, they started to return over the course of about 12 months. We were reporting this to the doctors and the clinics that we were under, and they were saying, oh, it's probably just some more of his focal complex partial seizures. We actually got it on camera, on video one time, and we showed it to our neurologist, and he said, no, they're tonic-clonic seizures. We need to get on top of this. So thank goodness for videos on phones. And he's now on lacosamide as well, and his VNS has been increased. But as you'll see, it took a couple of years to get to the diagnosis. So what treatments we've been on? So there's a nice long list. I'm sure a lot of you will recognise many of those AEDs. We've been out there, we've been trying quite a few. Nothing's really happening. He's also been on Ritalin. He got a diagnosis for potential ADHD at some point early on. Didn't really help at all. It wasn't ADHD, I don't think. My not medical person think it was just the seizures. But he's had the VNS pretty much, most of the way through since he was 8 years old. David's now 20. So what do I believe? What do we believe worked well? Well, the steroids, for us, were a magic bullet. It had to be the steroids that worked for David. That was the real turnaround point for him. I don't know, that's worked for other people, but that's what seemed to really bring everything back into play again. The VNS seems to be a constant underlying improvement for David. He hasn't got full seizure control. He's having 3-4 seizures every day, mostly, just complex partial type seizures lasting about 20 minutes. But, that's what we live with now. That's normal, and that's good. The ketogenic diet really helped, and the combination of VNS and ketogenic diet both have really improved mood and alertness for David, and that's been critical in these more recent teenage years with schooling and college, because he's been just so much more on the ball getting through those critical exams. And his underlying AED, which he kind of started out with very early on with Tegretol, and that's been the sort of the mainstay for him. But in our opinion, every time we've been adding on additional AEDs, they've not really helped. In fact, his seizures have typically got worse. So additional AEDs haven't really improved for David in terms of seizure control, and additionally, the side effects, the increase in the side effects with no improvement in seizure control, just no real balance. So my diagrammatic representation here is, I feel it's all about balance, and we have a really good relationship with David's neurologists, and always have done with his medical teams. And we talk about, are things improving with his seizure control with the treatments that he's having, and what about any side effects? And it's getting that balance right. We've never got full seizure control, but we've got to get optimum quality of life for David, because that's what's important. There's no good drugging him up and him having no quality of life, still having the same amount of seizures. A brief representation of what the seizures did. So the orange line shows the duration of seizures. So you'll see with the orange and the blue line, that spike at sort of 7 years old, where he had that massive spike in loads of seizures, and they were quite long, and they came in clusters quite often around that 7-year age mark before he hit the steroids, and they then dramatically reduced. But the pattern, as you'll see, as he's moved through from sort of 8 years to now 20 years old, is that the number of seizures are now starting to increase again, and they're increasing over time despite all of these treatments that we've been trying. And notably, the duration and the intensity of the seizures has been increasing as well. So that to me is interesting, but I don't know how that works for other people. Along the way, we've certainly had some concerns and risks. I've got a daughter, we've got a daughter as well, Jessica, she's 27. She's on holiday, so she would have loved to have been here with us today. But David's diagnosis has definitely had an impact on her. She never actually told us till years later, but she used to confide in her piano teacher because she was so concerned about her brother, but she didn't want to upset mum and dad. So she lived with us being up every night, running to hospitals, running to doctors with David seizing, and she was just 13 years old, but she was worried about us. We want to know, David has uncontrolled seizures, he always has had, and they're increasing. I don't know if that pattern's going to change, but is there any long-term impact of that on his cognition, behaviour, his future independence? That's important. And the tonic-clonic nighttime seizures, they're really scary, as we all know, but nobody's ever spoken to us, none of our medical teams have ever spoken to us about the risk of SUDEP. And yet, I know that there are 2 Ring 20 patients that have lost their life through uncontrolled seizures. I think there's only one written in medical literature. We know of another family, at least one. I think that's really important. That's frightening to me, and I think it's something that I want to share. So how do we cope with all of this? And I think this is me sharing how we've done things, and maybe there's something that you guys can take away. So we have a fantastic support network. I couldn't do any of this without the network that we've built around us, and we couldn't do any of this. It's the immediate family. It's my husband Dave, it's Jessica, it's David, it's us as a nuclear family together. But then there's the extended family and our friends. You can't, do it. Our friends, David's friends, they're really important. We've had a lot of support in education and employment too, and education particularly. David's now starting to seek employment, but it's really important to get the right level of support at school. It's a battle, but you need it. Getting support to attend social groups and activities has been really important. And also there's getting support through local and national government organisations and charitable organisations that can provide support to families, and they've really helped us. We've got some groups that support us through the educational support and all those kinds of things. And to move on, how we've managed the impact of these things. So the educational support, many of you will know here in the UK, it's now called an educational healthcare plan that you need in place with the schools. It's a battle, it's a fight, but you need to get one for your child if you want them to achieve the best through their education. When we're moving into employment, we're going at the moment, access to work is supposed to be there, but there's limited funding. There are a number of benefits. I'm going to have to rattle through this pretty quickly, but it's important to go out and look what's there, and we claim a number of these different things. And David claims himself now, because as an adult he has his own right to claim these sorts of things. From a medical perspective, we all have loads of appointments. How many appointments and clinics and visits do you do? You need to make time for them, you need to be prepared for them, do your homework and ask the questions, make the best of that time. And if you're concerned about nighttime seizures, we've invested in a seizure alarm, but again, not something our medical teams have ever spoken to us about. That was our choice. There's a lot of help out there from social perspective. If any of you know, again, in the UK, there's a CEA card. One person goes to the cinema for free as a carer with your child or with another adult, to be honest. So there's lots of help and concessions out there for days out. So no reason you get out there. But this whole thing is stressful. You guys know that. So you need to take time out for you individually, for you as a family. You need to live life outside Ring 20. I'm really proud of my son, so I couldn't go away without giving this. David's done some great things, but I think notably his expedition to Kenya with the scouting movement a couple of years ago, David raised nearly £2,000 to go on an expedition to help those less fortunate than himself living in the slums in Kenya. And there's David laying a wreath on Baden Powell's grave, who's buried out there. As I say, David's now moving into adulthood. Transition wasn't really transition for us. We're moved into adult services and that's quite a shock. It's a big change. And the big thing for us is, as parents, the adult neurologists speak to the patient as a parent, you're just there as an aside. You're not the parent anymore. And it's really difficult when you've been used to the one that's been spoken to. But the other big thing that we've noticed through the appointments with the adult neurologists, and also through speaking to them through conferences and things, is adult neurologists typically, and this may be stereotyping, but this is my understanding, they treat the symptoms, not the syndromes, not the cause of the epilepsy. So they'll say, what type of seizures? Right, so what treatment are we going to have? They're not interested in Ring 20. Not heard of it, not interested. It's a real different world out there, and there's a big education to go on, I think. My view, personal view. And young epilepsy, your guys are going to go next door and have some help from Janine shortly for some of the transition service that they put in place, which David has benefited from. David's now out there trying to seek work, so there's new challenges for us ahead. He's got his first interview next week, so we wish him the best of luck with that. But there's a big question mark. Big question mark for David is, when do you disclose your seizures? Do you tell in advance? Do you put it on your CV, on your application form? Does that put off employers? What about discrimination? Because he's been to an interview, had a seizure, and the worst case scenario was the employer had called the police and an ambulance. He's having a complex partial seizure, so over the top. And David, just like Dale, he's been inspired by Dale. He wants to go into supported living. He wants to live independently in the future. And we've made our first step on that path. And David now has what they call a personal assistant to take him out and give him that independence. Because he has such regular seizures, he can't travel independently. But yet he needs to and wants to access the community. So here's the crystal ball. We started with the diagnosis. What is the prognosis? What's predicted for the future for Ring 20? I don't think we know. But how do we find the answers? Well, this is my view on things. I'm using Johari's window, if any of you recognise this. So sorry for being a bit corporate. Here today, we're information sharing. We're sharing as families. We're sharing as families with health professionals sharing with each other. There's that collaboration going on. It's the known knowns. It's the stuff that we know about between ourselves, and we're sharing that. That's really important. Our blind spots, which we need to open up from, is education and awareness, and that's a lot of what this weekend is all about, as I feel. We need to educate others, and this filming and everything will be shared with others to help educate other families that haven't been able to attend today and their medical teams, because they've been asking, can we see what's happening? Can we hear what the speakers, can we get some info? And raising the awareness of Ring 20, because we've heard about the difficulties with the diagnosis. Ultimately, we don't know what we don't know, but how do we find that out? Research. I'm going to leave you with a few words. Thanks very much for listening.